Susan, I am so glad to see you. Hi.
So, this finally happened. We have emailed to each other back and forth, and I've been a big fan of yours for so many years. We use so many of your products on all of our dogs here. This is exciting, face-to-face meeting, sort of.
So nice meeting you because, when I was preparing for this chat, I was really intimidated because I was thinking, I don't know much about behavior. And my dog is, he's perfect. Every dog is perfect, but he does have some bad habits. And I also feel often that I'm not giving him enough things to do. And he's a border collie. So we'll have so much to talk about. And I know that our listeners and viewers are going to be really keen learning all the stuff that you know. And before we start with the science and stories and hints and points, I'd like you to take us to the very beginning of your life and how you got into dog training.
Wow.
And maybe not about dog training only. Also, I'd like to know the person. I'd like to get to know the person behind the dog trainer with accolades and achievements and championships and wins. So who are you as a trainer and also as a person?
That's an interesting question that I've never been asked before. And I think they both have influenced each other tremendously. And I think if you own a dog, that you are a dog trainer when you own a dog. And that dog absolutely influences you. And what we've learned now about the science is it influences your neural pathways. And all the things that I always put out as an intangible kind of ethereal suggestions, now science is saying, yeah, you're onto something. So I grew up in a family with 7 brothers and 2 sisters.
Oh my goodness.
Very much influenced by my brothers.
So, family.
Yeah. And 25 years between us all. But I was really influenced by the boys more so than my sisters. So my sisters were very girly and I was very much a tomboy. So I loved sports and played every sport I could. And I kind of went towards the mindset of sports. And so I was a big fan of people like the late John Wooden and Lou Holtz and another big one, Zig Ziglar. I was a big fan. So it was all about positivity. I remember one time working out and listening to Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. I listened to that. It was a 9-hour cassette. And I listened to it on repeat for 8 months. I kid you not. So yes, I have ADHD, and yes, I get obsessive about things. Those definitely were huge influences in my life from the time I was a teenager. And my sister, who was 7 years older, she showed dogs in conformation. That's when I fell in love with it all. I don't know how my sister, as a 12-year-old, decided she wanted to show dogs in conformation, but it wasn't until she was in her early 20s that it happened. And by the time I was in my teens, I would tag along and help. And when I wasn't helping her, I would stand by the obedience ring in awe. Like I thought it was magic that people could make dogs do those things. And this was in the 70s when dogs weren't taught in a way that was filled with kindness. I thought that was something that only certain people of this world could achieve. And wouldn't it be magical? It was a pipe dream. And then I went to university. I went to the University of Guelph and I studied animal behavior there. And I became fascinated with one of my intro psych classes, which led me to animal behavior courses, that I really got interested in the idea of influences of behavior. I went from there and I got involved with horses. So I was involved with horses and my number one love was cows. I believe it or not, loved cows. So I made my way through university milking cows, which is all kind of funny, because I'm vegan, but I have a degree in agriculture and studied majoring in animal science. But of all of those things, I believe they're meant to be. So my days when I milk cows it's a tough life, getting up at 5 a.m. and working till 8 a.m., but I really developed strong work ethic. And again, a love for all animals, not just dogs, which is
I find it so fascinating, Susan, because I grew up in a family. My dad was a farm vet. So I started with the cows, basically. Then I moved on to horses. Then I went through cats onto dogs. And, you're describing the work ethics and all that stuff. Like we had to work in the stables, right? And we had to, all that. So I almost feel like we are from the same universal cluster.
Yeah.
Somewhere out in the universe, there is the There are the people like us who go through cows to horses to dogs.
I was obsessed with cows, and I had decided I wanted to be a large animal vet. So that was my goal, being at the University of Guelph. And it was definitely a higher hand that said, this isn't what the plan is for you, because I developed a severe allergy to cows, which is bizarre. I could be in the dirtiest, dustiest horse barn, but I couldn't be in a pristine milk parlor. And I went through, when I was in university, I did like allergy shots because I was determined to spend a life with cows, but that wasn't where I was meant to be. So it just didn't work for me. I still had this horrible allergy to cows. So that brought me around to dogs. I was showing in dressage and riding horses, and one of my coaches said, why don't you get back in dogs? And I'm like, yeah, I love horses. And they're like, you can have both. So led me to getting a Jack Russell, because if you ride at the time English, then you had to have a Jack Russell. And
I like that. I can imagine it. Like, I've seen that before.
absolutely. It was like people who rode Western had Australian Shepherds, and people who rode English, they had Jack Russell Terriers. I don't think that. This was many years ago. So my coach said, let's go to training classes together. And I said, well, I know how to train dogs because my sister had, her first dog was a toy poodle, and I taught it all these tricks. And so she encouraged me to go to a training class. And it was in that training class that I asked one of the instructors, now I'm hooked on this. Tell me a good dog training book. And this was in 1988. He said, there hasn't been a good one written yet, but you should buy Karen Pryor's Don't Shoot the Dog, because it's the closest thing, and definitely changed my outlook on animals and led me to my mentors, the late Dr. Marion Bailey, who was a graduate student of B.F. Skinner's, and her husband, Bob Bailey, who is still a mentor of mine. So they were doing amazing work out of Hot Spring, Arkansas, training animals for, I think 80% of their income came from the military, for animals for espionage. And 20% came from the General Foods doing, teaching chickens to play tic-tac-toe for fall fairs and things like that. They're doing amazing things out of this place in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So I just fell in love with their work, and I would go down and spend 5 days straight learning how to train chickens, because they found them to be an amazing model of behavior.
Wow. So, I'm just kind of listening to you, and it's all coming together because I've been listening to podcasts and learning from all sorts of different people, including yourself. And I love the idea that I kind of knew that we are programming our dog's brain through the neural pathways, and we're building them and enforcing them and all that stuff. But he also said that our dogs actually shape and form our neural pathways. And I can't agree with you more. And it's kind of unrelated, but I remember when I lost our late dog Sky in 2017, and there were many different habits and rituals that we had, but I kept looking over my shoulder for maybe a year to look at the back seat, and there was no dog for a year. And so, I'm going back to all sorts of different neural pathways, but, I try to actually convince my clients sometimes that, living a healthy lifestyle with their dogs is actually relatively easy, that we just have to really make ourselves robotic, that we get up in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and we go for a walk, right?
Exactly.
Or something like that. But it's just it's so intriguing and interesting what you're saying. So tell me more. If you could distill, before we start about enrichment and, how to make our dogs happy and not bored, if there is one sentence you could distill your training philosophy into a single sentence, what would it be and why?
So the sentence that I repeat on my podcast over and over again is that our dogs are doing the best they can with the education we've given them in the environment that we've put them in. And that is an influence of the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, who used to say that about people, something very similar. Everybody you meet is doing the best they can. But recognize, if the world that own animals adopted this belief that I have held firm to for the last, well, I've been training dogs for 30 years, but really my philosophies and my vision for dogs has changed. But in the last 20 years, I have held firm to that. And I've never been proven wrong. I believe it's not a coincidence that dog spelt backward is God. I believe that every dog is sent to us, that it is brought to help us learn lessons as humans that will help us ascend to be our highest. And I think that it's not just dogs. Like for all humans, there's a vector in our lives. For some people, it might be children or it might be their job that help us learn the lessons we are intended to learn. But I know that those lessons are available to anybody who owns a dog. But sometimes...
And who also works with dogs. So you're superhuman in some way because you've had so many teachers, so many dogs that you worked with. And I agree with you about so many things. It's actually almost scary because you can go to my podcasts and my videos. I don't always say that. But one of my greatest teachers, like in the past, maybe 10, 20 years ago, was Wayne Dyer.
Oh, really?
And he also said that we have to do what we love to do, that we have to basically, what we lose ourselves in is what we need to do for life. That's our mission. That's our passion. That's our job, right? So how has your understanding of animal science and behavior evolved over time? Like, there's always a timeline. I started with conventional medicine and now I'm kind of saying, please don't use too many drugs, use natural diet. How did it go for you in animal training and behavior?
We're both scientists, and we both understand that science is a glimpse of truth today. It isn't truth forever. It's an accumulation of what we know. And so I look at what we know in the world of reinforcement-based dog training or force-free dog training or whatever label you want to call it, is so much more than we knew 25 years ago, where I watched those dogs in the 70s that were not trained with food or toys. They were trained with the absence of punishment means you done correctly, is the reinforcement that you get.
My upbringing in the 60s.
Yes. I don't think it's a coincidence that there's a parallel, that in today's world, there's still a huge facet. I would say probably the majority of dog trainers, and definitely the majority of the popular social media dog trainers, absolutely believe in opposition to me. They believe that reinforcement has a huge role in dog training, but dogs need to know, do it, damn it. Whereas I truly believe that dogs are doing the best they can with the education they've been given. And so if you believe that dogs test you or they test boundaries, then when a dog does something that you believe you've taught and they should know better, immediately you can't help but feel wronged. Ego steps in. And you might grit your teeth when you're training. Now, it might escalate from there. Some people might start screaming and throwing things and really harshly correcting their dog. But let's say the most perfect human being that trains this way, there's still going to be a moment of, oh yeah, you're doing that to me? What kind of neurochemicals are being dumped in our system? How does that cortisol affect us? And then we know there was a great study done at the University of Naples, I believe, in Italy. I actually went to visit the lab and talk to the scientist who did this study because I was so fascinated by it. So Giovanni, I can't remember his last name. Anyway, he had a lab in a different country of Europe, collect sweat samples. You may have heard of this story. They collected.
No,
So he had them collect sweat samples from people. The first group of people, they showed like a really scary Stephen King movie so that people watching were terrified. And they collected sweat samples from those people. Then they had a different group of people watch like a Disney funny, heartwarming, and they collected sweat samples from those people. And then I actually have pictures. I went into the lab and saw the experimental design. They still had it set up. And what they did then is they had a stranger sit in a very small cubicle reading a newspaper. And as the dog and their owner, they just put out people who own dogs in the neighborhood, come on out, and if you want to be involved in the study, so that all different breeds, they would walk into this little cubicle. The man's reading the paper. They would have the owner turn left, and there's a little chair there. So the dog could see the man reading the paper, sitting with their owner on their leash. And then after everybody kind of settled, I can't remember exactly how long they gave that to happen, a few minutes, the researcher came in with a box and that had a sample of one of those, either sample A or sample B. And it was ridiculous, the findings. Like, it was excessive of 90%. So once the box was there, they released the dog, and the dog immediately, being a dog, there might be food in there, they immediately went over and sniffed the box. If the dog sniffed a box that had a Disney smell, they immediately, they started to get soft and wiggled their way over to the person with the newspaper. And some of them, almost every dog approached the stranger and approached with a very soft body language with a tail wag. When it was a Stephen King movie smell, 90% of the dogs got suspicious. They may have growled. They ran back to their owner. They hid behind their legs, proving our emotions is directly going down the leash or in the room to the dog.
Thank you. Because I've been, we'll talk about that, the leash aggression and all that stuff. We'll have so much to talk about. But this is really interesting and amazing. I also like the idea that you're saying, we can't really treat dogs with dominance and force. And I actually always imagine, and maybe I'm a crazy dog person, so I think you'll understand, but I always imagine being a dog and how I would feel if the human treated me that way, right? So if I see someone mistreating a dog, I try not to get too, I try to be there for a dog if he's physically abused or something on the street. So I just try to, count things down. But if people only imagined what it would be like if they were treated the same way they treat their dog, I think that half of the problem would be solved, right?
I had a coach who was a specialist of jumping for horses, who I convinced her to look into teaching dogs how to jump better for the sport of dog agility. She would always say, if people had to ride their dogs, they would know the demands they're putting on them are unfair. So it's kind of the same thing. If you could see through the eyes of your dog, and that's why dogs are such brilliant creatures, because they put up with the BS that get handed to them, and they know they're here as souls that are meant to help us. And so they will put up whatever that is. And to their great credit, if you really become a student of body language, they will share with you the impact of even you gritting your teeth, right? And so when you look at, if you're a trainer who believes the dog needs to know they're wrong, that they have to be blamed, you will be experiencing one set of neurochemicals on an ongoing basis. If you're a trainer like me who believes the dogs are doing the best they can with the education we've given them in the environment we've put them in, then when a dog does something that I don't expect, I get curious.
Yeah.
Did I overwhelm you by the environment I put you in? Was the challenge too great? Or did the training I thought I did, was it incomplete? And I'll always come back and I'll work on one of those two things, and I'll always get great results, Peter.
Wow. So I'd like to hear a story where a dog surprised you and when you learned something completely unexpected, when a dog taught you something that you didn't expect. Can you remember?
It's pretty much daily. Any dog will coach me. So mostly when I'm raising puppies, I expect the unexpected. So I'm always looking for what they are uptaking. I'm looking for the light bulb moments where the puppy goes, you get it. Okay, we can work together now. I give that puppy autonomy. I want them to make choices. I empower them. I will reinforce you. I will create an environment that makes you want to choose what I want you to choose, and then I will reinforce that choice. And
Give me an example. Give me an example.
There's a great game that I learned from a student I was teaching in Italy, and his name is Vito. There's a podcast episode on it. I called it the Vito game. I've been sharing it all over the world. And so if you sit with just a handful of cookies And I use 2 targets. You could do 2 paper plates, one on each side of you. You sit cross-legged in a small room where there isn't anything to distract the puppy, and you're just sitting with your hands kind of hovering over. Now, our puppies all learn a game called It's Your Choice, which our team has got a link set up for your podcast listeners that they can get access to this game so that the dogs won't mug you for the cookies in your hand. They're going to figure out how they can earn them. When the puppy or the dog just kind of walks in the direction of one or the other plates, you just drop a cookie on that plate. So then they eat it. They might look up at you. They might start moving back to the center because that's where it all started, and you drop a cookie on the other plate. And then they eat that, and after 2 or 3 cookies, they're like, oh, game on. And they just start going from plate to plate because a cookie's going to be dropped. Well, once they've got that pattern, you could put like a little traffic cone in between you. And then they're going around the traffic cone. Then you move it further out, and there's now a gap between you and the traffic cone. Eventually, they're going to try to go through the gap because it's faster to get to the plate. You say nothing, you do nothing, you just allow them to figure it out. So they go back through the gap, and eventually they go, well, how did I get all those cookies? Oh, I went around the cone. So then they go around, and you just see this little light bulb go, oh, I'm a problem solver, and she's letting me be a problem solver.
Basically, you give them treats only when they go around, but when they go through, you don't give them a treat, and they solve
Correct. However, Peter, we start it with the cone touching us, so it's impossible for them to go around. They have many repetitions of that, and then we move it out a little bit. So there's a bit of a gap they can see. And then we move it out just enough that at one point they've gone around that cone so many times before they make their first failure. Their first failure, and they don't get a cookie, and they're going to go, that, and they'll probably go through the gap one more time, and they still don't get a cookie, and they go, okay. And they'll go back to what they did previously, which was go around the cone. Wow. And so we'll play games like this to create any behavior that we want. We can get them circling the cone. We can get them going from one cone to another. We can grow that to be anything we want. So the way that we teach dogs at Dogs That, all of our classrooms, our online classrooms, anything we do in person, everything is done through a game that engages the dog's brain and that gives full autonomy to make choices. We start out with easy choices, but quickly we can grow to a point where we have a rescue dog right now. He's probably the biggest puppy we've had here. So he's 9 months old. We got him at just before he was 4 months old. Actually, he's 8 months old now. He is 70% of him. We did the embark test. So 70%, he's American Bulldog, American Bully, German Shepherd. That's 70%. Then some Alaskan Malamute, some Siberian Husky. He's a big dog, confident dog, he's been trained this way entirely. So I was doing some work with him last night because I want him to, what we want from our dogs. I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's say we have a dog who chases squirrels or chases chipmunks, and a dog like that would definitely want to kill them. Right? It goes back to a dog's innate drive. Dogs have what's called a canine predatory motor sequence. It starts with a sight, a sound, a smell that they alert. I heard something. And then they will locate. That's the second step in sequence. They locate, they'll stalk. They don't go from locate to chase because they know if I chase and the animal's 200 feet away from me, I'll never catch it. So they go locate. Then they go stalk. From stalk, when they get close enough, they'll chase. Then after the chase, they'll do a bite to grab, a bite to kill, then an evisceration, and then a consumption. That is the innate.
That's the program that they've been programmed for hundreds of thousands of years.
But the breeding of domestic dogs has diluted some sequence. With border collies, as you know, if you own one, the stalk has been exaggerated. So a border collie can stalk for a long distance, right? So that's pretty much that. But what most people who are training dogs, they focus on what they don't want the dog to do. They don't want them to chase. They don't want them to bite. And so they believe that those of us who train in a positive way, a reinforcement-based system, have no way that we could stop that dog. But we, as scientists, know that when a dog is in that sequencing, they're not in their thoughtful brain. So learning can't happen when you're in over-arousal. And so we would never try to take a dog who is in the middle of that predatory cycle and say, you must stop. we would do, and this is what I was working on with this puppy last night, when you alert, and then oftentimes that alert and sight, those two things happen simultaneously. What we do is we work on alert, redirect back to us, or alert, find it, then redirect back to us.
Yes.
So that we break that cycle, and it's hugely valuable for them to break that cycle. We play a lot of games after they break the cycle. So I met with my Jack Russell Terriers who were like, they won national championships of go to ground. They all were ratters. All the Jack Russells I owned, I'd take them into the barn, they'd kill the rats in the feed room. So they had that. I could let them chase a squirrel. And I would purposely say, where's the squirrels? Where's the squirrels? And I'd open the door and they'd make that terrier scream. Ah! I'd let them get like part way. And then I'd just say, all right, mom back. And they'd come running right back.
Wow. Because you teach them how to break that natural response. Yeah, I get it.
To redirect.
There is so much that we could talk about today. And I have a feeling, tell me if I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that we will probably have to do continuation of this because we have a lot of questions that people will be wondering where to find all your information and all that. And we'll tell everyone where to find you. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about canine enrichment. And Robin, one of my team members, she's got 5 dogs. They're amazingly trained. She loves you. And whenever she talks about enrichment, I'm thinking enrichment, it sounds so weird. Like, why is it called enrichment? Because, enrichment in the original kind of format is enriching yourself, right, with something. But so tell me, why is it called enrichment? What is behind it? And why should all dog lovers actually really listen right now?
Enrichment feeds into the natural drives of the dog. And I think there's as much misunderstood about enrichment as there is understood. So we could talk about what enrichment is and what it isn't, because there's enrichment alone, there's enrichment with socializing, there's enrichment with engagement, there's enrichment for fitness or for conditioning. But really good enrichment will feed into the dog, what the dog needs physically, maybe but maybe a combination of what the dog needs physically or emotionally, that they don't all do that thing. Like I talked about the canine predatory predation motor sequencing, that there is some enrichment that feeds into that. So I recognize early on with my puppies, what part of that cycle is very predominant in the puppy. So for some puppies, they love squeakies. That is the bite grab part of the cycling that they love. And they'll mouth that squeaky over and over. Some, they get the squeaky and they just want to eviscerate. So if I have a puppy that likes to eviscerate, I do not want my puppies to eviscerate stuffed animals because, as you know, as a veterinarian, that could lead to some serious complications and need for surgeries with impaction. I replace that. I see what it is that puppy likes. What is that natural part of the cycling that they tend to, and then I will replace that. So, for example, almost all my dogs, they love the evisceration, but I've never had a dog that destroys stuffed animals because I recognize that early on, and I replace it with something I call puppy bombs. Anytime I'm going to have a puppy or bring in a rescue dog, I collect toilet paper rolls and paper towel rolls. And I just fold in the end, put a few cookies in there and fold in the ends. And then the puppy gets to shred that in order to get, they're eviscerating and consuming. It's part of their natural cycling. So enrichment feeds into the natural drives, emotions of the dog. So it could be like some dogs love to scent. So hide and seek would feed into those natural drives. Hiding cookies or hiding toys would be something. I think enrichment has to provide agency for the dog in that they are in control of whatever that enrichment is. You aren't telling them that they have to do this.
It was Wayne Dyer. Whatever Wayne Dyer said. So it's like when our dogs lose themselves in time and are totally gone because they just love something. That's the part of enrichment. Is it right?
Exactly. So It gets free choice. It creates what we call a positive CER, a positive conditioned emotional response. Like the dog feels that when they are engaged in an enrichment activity, it has a level of challenge. And I'll talk more about how to create all this in the activities that you're giving that. But for example, if you just said, I'm going to give my dog a bone every day, and it's the same bone every day, not a lot. I mean, it could be a little enriching, but not the same bone every day. You've lost that. So that brings me to another point about enrichment. There needs to be variety.
Very diet of enrichment.
A varied diet of enrichment, just like raw feeding. You need varied protein sources for your dog.
Smorgasbord, targeted towards the natural instincts of a particular dog, correct?
Natural instincts of the dog, that it feeds that either their physical, their social, like you're feeding into what fills that dog up. And it doesn't need to take a lot of time. It doesn't need to take a lot of effort. Like, for example, most people have a lot of toys for their dogs. And they'll have like an overstuffed toy box. Well, if you want to provide more enrichment to your dog, you're going to figure out what are their favorite toys. And you might cycle in those favorite toys so that they're new and unique again. So you might have one instead of like 1,000 of them out there, because 1,000 is just monotony now. Oh, they're always there. I don't really care. But if they
Too
always
much.
access
Too
to
much.
their favorite, and then you take away the favorite and add a new favorite. Where's that monkey been? I haven't seen him. So all of a sudden it creates more of that positive emotional response from the dog, that it is something that they look forward to. So that's really, I would say, it was a long description of what enrichment is. But
Lovely description. It's basically whatever your dog loves to do, create a safe, healthy form of it.
Yep.
And vary it in different formats and so on. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. So I wonder whether you can give me some advice about that. Practical example. So Pax loves to chase when I move things quickly, like he's super fast. And when I let him get something, whether it's a toy or even a leash that, that we have like tied in a knot, and he loves to shake it. So he doesn't really chase animals.
That is the cycle. It's stalk, chase, bite. The shaking is the kill. It's just, you're giving great demonstrations of that.
Okay. So how do people find out what their dog's preferences are?
Well, just by observing the way their dog interacts with their environment and with other toys. So, and knowing the breed, but not all dogs are going to be, like not all border collies are going to be the same. So I've had some border collies that love squeakies. I've had others that could care less, those dogs. And I would say generally the things that we would use for enrichment, they don't need to be breed specific or dog specific, but there are things that we really want to touch the soul of our dog, is check out what part of the cycling. So for a dog that, like your dog, that loves chase, a flirt pole would be an amazing activity for them to be involved with. They get the chase, quick changes of direction.
Yeah,
They
absolutely. You're so right. And for bulldogs, it's skateboard, right?
That's a great enrichment. Absolutely is enrichment. And
I don't really understand how they could be so fantastic. Like, can you explain it to me? Like they seem like they behave like teenagers. They're cool.
Yes.
They push off and they ride. Like, can you explain it to me? I
think generally, I mean, we have Tater Salad, who is 50% bulldog, and he likes to shortcut anything. I mean, he loves to be active, but if there is a easy way to do it, so if riding was an option, he would totally be riding.
Oh, cool. Because they're short legs, right? They're not really built for movement. So they like to ride. He would be driving a sports car, right? Like if they could.
Totally be driving. So we share a property line with a golf course. So Tater Salad came to us when he was 15 months old. He had done everything a dog could have done wrong in a household. He destroyed 3 couches. Mm-hmm. He couldn't be walked because he chased people and animals, and he would bite you if you tried to cut his nail. He didn't want to do. So if he got away from you, he beelined it to the golf course, and he would just jump on a golf cart. Take me somewhere, I don't care. He just wanted to go for a ride. Mm-hmm. And of course, the golfers would be like, it's okay, we love dogs. And he loved people. But yeah, bulldogs, I think, like Easy Street. For sure. They are such characters. Definitely different. Okay.
So I feel probably similar to you right now because I'm just so excited about this conversation. So how does behavior like anxiety or some sort of frustration, destructive behavior, how can enrichment be actually part of the solution?
Well, I said before we get to that, Peter, I want to make it really clear about some of the things that enrichment are not.
Okay, great.
Anything that is dangerous to a dog, you can't consider that enrichment. So, one of the things that is popular with pet people, which is horrific in my mind, is getting a dog to chase a laser pointer.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that could be enriching, but it's so dangerous, please.
So dangerous, so dangerous for the eyes. And even I think that dogs become, when they become so frenetic and kind of hyper, people think that when they make their dogs busy, like machines, that that's exercise or that'll calm them down, but it'll make the opposite, right?
Absolutely. And so when they're chasing something that can never be caught, you're actually creating more anxiety. Something like that, what happens is you'll notice someday the sunlight will catch your Apple Watch. And the dog will suddenly start getting crazy about that shadow. And then you have shadow chasers, and it just can snowball into horrific, damaging OCD behaviors. So laser pointers, definitely not one. Anything that can be, like, I wouldn't use like a squeaky toy or enrichment, even some of the food puzzles, which I love, Oldison's food puzzles, but I would not leave a puppy unsupervised, like I'm not leaving the house with any of them that can break apart, that they can chew and swallow and have a problem with. So squeaky toys that the animal could swallow. And so unsupervised is too much of a dangerous. I think also passive entertainment is not a form of enrichment. So people putting on the TV for their dog or a radio. Yeah, there's a role in that for white noise, but it's not enrichment. Please don't call it enrichment.
Well, I experienced something this morning. I was coming from the gym on the tram, on the streetcar. I'm in Prague, and public transit actually works. And dogs are allowed. That's fantastic. But I was actually on the transit, and there were like 30 school kids. And I took a picture because all of them were on the phone. So I think that we are trying to sometimes take a shortcut to give kids iPads or phones to entertain them. And with dogs, the same, right? So you wouldn't turn on TV when you're leaving home. You would exercise your dog, enrich your life, and then leave, right? Like if you need to leave them behind.
Exactly. Likewise, you wouldn't want enrichment activities to be too overwhelming or overstimulating. Like taking a dog to a dog park is too overwhelming
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you're saying that. I'm so glad you're saying that.
or unstructured puppy daycare.
Oh my goodness. I took my dog, Sky, to a daycare only once when we were moving in 2002. And I remember it as if it was yesterday because I remember coming back and he sat in the corner and he looked at me and he said, "What did you do to me?" It was just so overwhelming. And I know it's mayhem, right?
It's mayhem.
So, with all the respects, I know that many daycares are there, organized and well structured, but it would be another chapter, another talk about how to choose daycare and how to choose all those, how to choose these places where we take our dogs. I had inadvertently created a shadow chaser because we had butterflies on our property.
Nice.
And they were throwing shadows. And my dog Pax, when I was working and he would be out, he would start chasing these shadows. And he's better than he used to be, but I shouldn't have let him be there, right, on his own.
Well, ideally, when you notice that, and it's going to happen with some dogs more than others, you notice it, you just redirect them. Have them, I like what I call as a hot zone. So if I'm out in the garden and I see that potentially the dog could be obsessing on something, then I'll just say, hop it up, and there'll be a raised dog bed somewhere for them. They can then be, you can hang out with me, but I don't want you
Nice.
going off chasing wildlife or obsessing on a shadow or in the water. Like digging in the water, I'm another obsessive border collie.
Or fishing. Is fishing okay for golden retrievers?
All of those things I think are great enrichment, is used as a tool, but not allowed to be OCD behaviors. So when it give them free access to those sorts of things. They
How
would
do
be,
you recognize the OCD between OCD and enrichment?
well, if I gave one of my border collies, he's almost 15, if I gave him access to a pool, he would just stay in there and dig in it.
Oh, really? Oh,
Right? He
really?
loves to see the water splash. And so he definitely, at the end of our walk, he gets to go in there and paddle, and then I call him out. So any behavior that the dog starts to obsess about, they love it. It has to be put on cue. You get to do it when I invite you to, and you ignore it at any other time. That's part of the game-based training that this is. And I would say with most enrichment activities, there's a cue that goes on before them. Certainly not all, but definitely most of them. And when you think about enrichment, there's some that are just enrichment alone that I just love to see the dog enjoy themselves. So squeaky toys are one. Who is the 8-month-old bully puppy that we have? When I was training at the end of yesterday's training, I was training some really hard brain games, and it was about chasing prey and stopping when I asked. So I had a toy, waving it in front of his face, released him and asked him to sit or down while the toy keeps moving. And if he did that, I threw another toy behind him, and he could grab it, and he just ran around the field squeaking it. And squeak and squeak. And that was a release of stress. That was really hard brain work. And now I get an exhaust. I get decompress by running around and squeaking. So that's just plain enrichment alone when you let a dog just play with a squeaky toy, and that's okay. But a lot of enrichment can help you grow behaviors as well. And as I said, if you're going to have toys as enrichment, I would rotate them. Same with bones. Like giving a dog a Kong. People say, oh, my dog's enrichment is I give him a Kong. Well, if you do that every day, anything you do every day is no longer enrichment.
Anything that you do every day for anyone, right? Like we can be in the best place and do the best things. And I sometimes actually, I've been really intrigued by the fact that humans, when they come to a new place, they liven up, right? Yeah. When you have visitors, they come to your town, they go, oh, it's so amazing. And you stop seeing things. But nature, based on what I've read and what I've learned, has conditioned us to notice only the new things that may be unsafe or dangerous and so on. So in dogs, probably very similar. They get bored of seeing the same thing.
Or of eating the same thing.
I think I could share this with you. Long time ago, my dear friend and team member, she's been still with me after 20 years, Emma, and I decided to pull a prank on a couple of our clients. They were old ladies, super sweet, like a Jewish lady and her friend, and they were in their 80s and they were super cool. And they came made up and, all done up and with their little doggies. And we decided to serve them uncooked pasta on the plate. And first reaction, they didn't know what was going to happen. And they, oh my goodness, they served us dog food. They were cracking up. But that's one of the issues with processed food. Not the only one, definitely, but feeding the same thing over and over and over. It's unbelievable.
I just had a discussion with a very high-level trainer from Europe. 2 weeks ago, I was over there, and I saw that her dog did not have the tolerance for exercise that my dog did. I knew her dog was super fit, so I asked her what she fed. And I always feed all my dogs this kibble and only this protein source and that. And I'm like, okay, well, we won't go into why I think you should raw feed, but you definitely shouldn't feed. It was lamb. And I'm like, lamb is the protein source you go to if you have a problem. If you use it as the routine, you've got nothing to go to if you have a problem. Plus, lamb is such a hot meat with a border collie that's so high energy and high drive. That is a big reason why they have no tolerance for exercise. So that is the side.
They overeat.
Yeah.
We'll go back to enrichment, but one thing comes to mind. When you have people who are well-intended but stubborn or not open-minded, what do you do? Because you're training people, not dogs, right? Like in your business, in your research, like you're basically trying to figure out how to train people so dogs can have good life. How do you deal with resistance?
So being a person who's been a based eater for more than 20 years, I see what didn't work. And that when vegans are trying to convince meat eaters not to eat meat, they are so rude. They tell people they're murderers. They tell them they're... And so, and again, how does that fill you? So This is so controversial in the dog space because I believe if you're a reinforcement-based dog trainer, people should be able to see that by the actions and the way you treat other people. And that includes people that are doing things that you morally object to. You're going to drive yourself insane if you try to control things that are out of your control. So all that I can do is hope to inspire a level, and that may lead to on a bigger level. By blaming and pointing fingers and being disappointed, and that I don't believe that's going to help anyone. So when people are doing things, it's like, okay, what can I do? If you're a person who eats meat 3 times a day, I'm going to give you some I make the best smoothies, the best nutritious, healthy smoothies, and you will want to have this for breakfast. So I've eliminated 1 meal of meat for you. And the same with dogs. I can help you just make one adjustment. And it's by leading by example, Peter. So I've got actually a reel I just did yesterday. We have a crazy food prep process here for the dogs that is ridiculous. I know it's over the top. So I went and videoed it yesterday. I've got a reel that I'm going to post on social media. So I don't expect people to do what I do. I am crazy obsessed with the health of my dogs. But if you would just add some blueberries and whatever vegetable you're eating tonight, put it in with your dog's regular meal, like that's the first step. That's the small win. And it's the same true with whatever you're dealing with as dog behavior that has got you so frustrated. If I can help make an improvement by helping you becoming more reinforcing to your dog, the emotions that you're feeling, the anxiety about your dog's behavior is going to your dog. Just take a deep breath and say, what can I control? You can't control your dog's behavior. I don't care what any dog trainer tells you. None of us are in control of any other being. We can just pretend to control with some tools, or we can inspire teamwork. And that's what I would want for this.
I find it exactly as you're saying, people who are pushy and try to convince others that they're wrong and the others are wrong and they're right. It never works, right? I kind of observe the level of resistance when someone is too pushy with me, but then I love to learn and love to be open and just kind of learning from others and just learning from those people who inspire me. And, I'm just kind of so enjoying this conversation that I have a feeling that we'll go over time. I'm not sure how much time you have, but I have a few other questions about enrichment. Are there common mistakes that people make? Like, if you could kind of say, don't do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on.
I think that what you could really do to benefit yourself and your dog is know what you're doing in that. There's a lot of things that you could do for enrichment, but doing enrichment for the sake of just giving your dog a little more emotional enjoyment in their life today. But there's also doing enrichment that is actually engagement. So things like training games, a game of hide and seek where you ask your dog to sit, you go hide in the other room and then give them a release cue, make a goofy noise so they try and find you. Like that's just something that is engaging with you, but it's still enriching. Anything that we do in any of our programs, so our online programs, all we do is teach different games for people that are strategic and have a reason, like either they're teaching you how to get a good retrieve or to get a good recall, or so that is both enriching and engaging. You could have enrichment that is also social. So it could be the enrichment of taking your dog to a cafe or to like a pet store, but a pet store can be very overwhelming for some dogs. I find my border collie puppies, when I go to a pet store, I have to be very careful of when I go near the bones that have that smell on them. So I avoid that aisle when I see that with my border collie puppies because they're very sensitive about that. So here in Canada, every Canadian Tire welcomes dogs. It's a great place to go.
Home Depot as well. Home Depot, I think, allows dogs.
Not all of them. So you have to check with that. A lot of the big box hardware stores do, but a lot of, like in our area, they do not. But I know all the Canadian Tires, it's a policy that they have. So and no matter where you're listening, I know your listeners are worldwide. I'm sure, especially if your European listeners are like, we bring our dogs anywhere. What's the big deal?
Yes.
So blessed, right? That's awesome. So that's enrichment for socializing. Socializing isn't a free-for-all. It isn't every person you pass, you get to visit. Because then you get a dog who is hypersocial. And that's a problem. Then they have anxiety when they see a person because they think they have to meet them. Puppy play, it's going into a training class, and it's socialization. So there's also like enrichment that can be fitness. Teaching a dog to dig, having a digging pit in your backyard. That can be enrichment. That is fitness for your dog. The same can be said with the little kiddie pools with water in it, or some people like to do a ball pit, where they jump in and out of the big thing of balls. So that can be enrichment, and it can be a little bit of fitness as well. But there's just things I like to do enrichment that when I'm doing it with a puppy, I'll be specifically conditioning something. So snuffle mats, where you can put different treats in the snuffle mat. I will use that anytime I have a puppy in an X pen and I'm going to take the other dogs out for a walk. Because if you get in the habit of just leaving the house and leaving that puppy behind, you will be creating separation anxiety. Point, that puppy's going to get anxious because they're not getting to go. Young, I will use things like puppy bombs that I mentioned with the toilet paper rolls, knowing that they're going to eat some of that. So just to give you a heads up on that.
It's eco-friendly, no chemicals, unbleached, please.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So the puppy puzzles, there's varying levels of complexity, because remember I said challenge is important. If they can learn to whip through a puzzle very quickly, you have to keep upping the ante and creating more challenge for them there. So I would give sometimes a puppy puzzle, sometimes a snuffle mat, variety when I would leave, that it's giving some enrichment, but it's also conditioning. It's a good thing when she leaves with the other dogs. I don't need to be concerned. It could be a special chewy that the puppy gets when you leave. With puppies, there's the company's called Freeze Bone, and they make all different things that you can freeze. And we put like rabbit ears in there. We put blueberries. We put all sorts of things. They have some that are like a tree, some that are like a mat. So that might be one of the things when I'm leaving that the puppy might get. So it's just enrichment can be like for those dogs like mine that love to shred things. It could be taking paper and putting treats in a paper and then putting that in a box and then putting more paper and treats in that box. And then the dog has to open a box.
Yes.
So
better than the stuffing, right? The plastic stuffing. It's much better.
So much better, because they're using their nose and just finding the treats and they're shredding and they're just ignoring that. But if they did eat the bits of paper, so much better than them to eat the stuffing.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you recognize that dogs are bored? Like so many people actually worry that the dogs are bored. And I have a little bit of a take on that too, because Pax taught me many lessons. But first, let's talk boredom, and then let's develop it into a little tree and see where it takes us.
I always go back to my mentor, always said, it's not possible for dogs to be bored. They don't understand that. But it's definitely possible for a dog to be understimulated. I think that is the falling of, people get excited about the idea of, without having a long-term vision on what that really means. That a dog isn't like a piece of furniture that is there for you on Saturdays when you feel like doing something. A dog deserves your attention on a very regular basis. But part of the training that we stress is teaching a dog to relax. That if you
routine, right? Routine and so on.
Routine. So like what I just said, when I leave the house with the other dogs to walk, that puppy will play their game and then they'll go to sleep. So they're learning to relax on their own. And then we intentionally do a cooperative relaxation protocol where it's great for the dogs when they go to the veterinarian. So that it's great when we want to cut. I don't have a dog in my house that doesn't love having their nails cut, because we've taught it cooperatively, where the dog is in a relaxed state and they say, okay, I'd like my pedicure now. But no dogs are born loving getting their nails cut. They all hate it.
Absolutely.
So that is part
of ice cream and then trim the nails, right?
Right, but that's never teaching.
I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
You've seen the people on YouTube that put like the peanut butter on their foreheads. And that is like part of enrichment that people do, is they think they're enriching, but they're just distracting. We want to teach a cued relaxation so that any one of my dogs, actually, there's one here. He's just curled up in the corner. He's a 20-month-old who, you're talking? He's just been curled up in his bed this whole time. We've been now talking for over an hour. And he's not left that bed. So That's a great gift you can give to your dogs, that you don't need to be entertaining them every moment that you are home. They understand, because there'll be times when you've got work to do. And if you've not taught this, they're going to be following you around the house.
Yes.
You're going to get frustrated with it.
And, I've seen some amazing, amazing kind people actually trying to do everything for their dogs. And they would actually spend virtually the whole day throwing the ball. And I think that this is not right.
No.
How do you correct that kind of behavior in a human and a dog?
Well, they think that the problem for some people, they'll do it because they've heard, if I exercise my dog more, they won't be destructive or they won't bark as much. And what will actually happen is your dog will get more fit and they'll just have more energy to be destructive and
hyperactive as well. Kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Playing computer days all day long, right? They become a little fidgety. Like I've seen that with border collies. Border collies especially need to know how to rest. When I saw them in the UK, in England, they would basically work and then they would rest. But I saw 25 years ago, I had this new client coming in and his border collie basically was dying of exhaustion. And I asked the owner what the dog was doing. She's chasing the ball with the kids all day long in front of the house. And so she started to stop eating. She started running fever. And she was treated locally. Nobody could figure out what's going on. But I had a border collie, so I knew exactly what was going on. And it was really interesting.
Dogs need to learn how to rest. So this puppy of mine, probably one of the highest drive puppies that I've ever had. And he's a border collie. He's been sleeping there for an hour.
Uh-huh.
So, and actually, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, and I'm ashamed to say he hasn't been trained and he hasn't been walked yet today. My dogs get walked for 2 miles a day, and they get some sort of training. I try to do that daily, but we've been very busy because we're opening one of our online classrooms this week. So,
oh my goodness, you have to talk more about it.
he's just waiting for me to
everyone
get off.
wait. We'll be giving you some important information. I hope we have still a little bit of time. I wanted to ask you about dog depression, mainly because as a vet and as a dog lover, I actually do have a feeling that dogs get depressed. I just wanted your take first before I pitch in with my observation and see whether...
I can share my observations that I believe dogs grieve when another dog in the house is passed. Depending on the relationship that dog had, that is very much a problem for them to overcome, which is why I'm very lucky that my veterinarian will come out to our home here and when it's time for our dogs to be euthanized, because that dog has passed. I invite all my dogs in one at a time to see that the dog has passed. There's a decline in the last 6 months that the other dogs can see, but it also is true of people. When something changes in your situation and there's a person that is no longer there, that depending on that relationship. So he heard the barking from your side, so he decided, pause up.
Yeah, that's Pax. He's outside. He's making sure we have a deck, and the deck is on 4th floor. And he loves overseeing everything as a border collie, making sure the buses are going on schedule and all that stuff. I'd like to see your dog.
Here, pause up.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
This is Prophet.
Prophet.
And he doesn't look like it now, but he's only 22 months old, but he's already one of the fastest agility dogs in the world. Wow. Yeah.
I have to watch some of the videos. That'd be fun. Now, Susan, I have had this absolutely mind-blowing experience about dogs being down or feeling down or looking down. And when my dog was neutered at the age of 2 years, because he's a certified service dog for my sleepwalking, and so he had to be neutered. And he completely changed. And I started to see almost like signs of aging. And he started limping. We couldn't figure out why he was limping and all that stuff. So in the meantime, I actually connected with Dr. Michelle Kutzler, who does hormone replacement therapy and has done a whole bunch of research.
Oh,
and so
wow.
we put my dog on hormone replacement therapy, and I have an article and a whole page on it. But I have my dog back.
Wow.
And I've done this several times now, another dog, 10-year-old pit bull, who's been always feeling kind of down, neutered at 2 months or maybe 3 months, diagnosed with mast cell tumor about 4 years ago. And we put him on kind of like a very innovative treatment with rapamycin, and he's still around. Mast cell tumor is not grown, but he turned 10 in the winter. And, nothing but sleeping and kind of down and not wanting to go for walks and so on. So we put him on HRT. And the same amazing response where I see actually happy dog that wants to go for walks, he sniffs, he's happy, and also he's much less inflamed, and the same with Pax, like he's back to normal. But that made me kind of think of all the humans as well who kind of go either through menopause or grumpy old men over 60 like me suddenly start declining.
I'm all in on hormone or bioidentical hormone.
You are, yeah. So anyway, I wanted to take an opportunity to share with the listeners here as well that if their dog feels low, or if there is some sort of chronic condition of almost any kind, inflammatory condition, learn a little bit more about the work of Dr. Michelle Kutzler. Speaking not to you, but I mean everyone.
I'm very curious about it, Peter.
We'll have a talk about it. We can.
One of the first things, which won't be your case, but one of the first things I tell people when they tell me that is nutrition. So it's either what with my own dog, I found that it was the protein levels were way too high. In most commercial raw food, the protein level are just way too high. And we can do a whole podcast on that because
I would love to. It would be so interesting. But I've been in practice for over almost 40 years, actually, 38 or 37. And this has been the most profound, mind-blowing kind of discovery that chronic disease is related to, of course, hormonal health, right? Hormones are the force that powers the whole metabolism. There are the substances that are super powerful. And we kind of thought, okay, it's going to be like just for reproduction and it's fine, but it is not fine. And it's been such a mind-opening and eye-opening experience. I think it's one of the greatest discoveries. I'm very grateful to the researchers who've done that. And so now we actually recommend hormone-sparing sterilization and leaving male dogs.
But how do you recommend that? Because the research that I've read, because I have a 10-year-old female, like I don't spay or neuter my dogs, but at some age, there is a concern. And so I have a 10-year-old that people maybe you should be considering it. But if you go with the spay that is the ovary sparing, then the ovaries will give out the signals to release, like there's nothing to trigger from their brain to stop the release of those hormones.
So the estrogens will be there, but we now know that estrogens themselves are actually not necessarily, like if you're thinking cancer or something like that. There is a 25% chance of pyometra, pussy inflammation of the uterus.
Yeah.
We do recommend, and I know that you know that, but I'm just kind of repeating for everyone else who's listening. So removing the uterus makes sense, but it's obviously very clearly evident in humans as well that the absence of hormones actually lead to all sorts of different inflammatory conditions that eventually lead to more cancer, more injuries, and more organ failure and all that. So I'd be very careful about spaying your dog and removing the ovaries.
Right.
Basically, nothing is ideal, right? Like ideally, we should leave our dogs the way they are, but they live hopefully longer than they lived in the wild, to about 3 times as long, right? Almost.
Yep.
So in females, removing the uterus, and in males, either nothing or vasectomies if we can't really make sure that they won't breed unwantingly. But anyway, it's like definitely another conversation.
In Finland, it's illegal to spay or neuter a dog.
Yeah. And I so love that you go to Europe because you understand what a different world it is. And if there is one thing that I'd like to do with you as well is to just kind of gradually, slowly shift and change the perception in the US and Canada about where dogs are allowed, and that they're so important, and that the governments will pay less money for healthcare, of human healthcare, and our society will be so much better.
Yeah,
so much better.
Agree.
Oh my goodness. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
As somebody with ADHD, I love that we've jumped around and covered so many things. It's been amazing. We talked about how somebody can, make sure like enrichment doesn't take the place of training. Just be sure that would be the bottom line. I want the take home message that enrichment can help your training. That's enrichment with engagement. But enrichment should serve different purposes. It should serve the physical needs, the emotional needs, the mental needs, the social needs of the dog. But enrichment, when you're using it as part of your training, that's when it all comes together. So, and there's just so many different tools, and you don't even have to spend a lot of money. Get some toilet paper rolls.
I have a feeling that you've talked about ADHD a little bit, and I have a feeling that the term ADHD has been invented by mediocre people to put down the ones with the talent, because I'm sure that Da Vinci and Tesla and Einstein and all those people would be actually labeled these days. And I just so enjoyed this conversation because you're full of energy. And, when Robin arranged this conversation with you, and I was just so excited and I couldn't wait. She said, you'll be fine. You'll have such a good time. And this is exactly what's been happening. So I feel like I have a new friend now.
Absolutely.
What I'd like to say is the world is better because of dogs, but the world is also much better because of people like you, because you love what you do and you make our life so much easier, and you actually help us to shed the guilt that we're not giving our dogs what they need and make us understand it better. So where can people find you? Where can they see your videos and take your courses and learn how to be the best dog lovers ever?
Thank you for that. That was beautiful, Peter. First of all, I want your listeners to have a free resource. So what we've done, our website is Dogs That, DOGSTHAT, dogsthat.com. And if you go to dogsthat.com/Peter, it'll take you right now to opportunity to get the It's Your Choice game that I talked about. That's 100% free. I kind of sprung this on the team this morning. And so they did set that up, but eventually they'll put other resources on that page where people who have listened to this can find our podcast, can find our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel right now has 400 tutorials on dog training. If you want to learn how to be kind and to lead with kindness in everything you do and all the interactions you have with your dog, then you will go to our YouTube channel. And in the YouTube channel, the team has got things so well organized. So there's playlists. So if you've got a new puppy, if you have a reactive dog, if you have a dog that's fearful, or, there's a playlist for just about everything you can think of, which, it's all free. And we've been doing online classes. Our first one we did in 2009. So we've been pretty ahead of the curve. And we've had hundreds of thousands of people go through we do a free online classroom for anybody. I don't want money to be a barrier to learn how to treat your dog with kindness. So every year we have this classroom, but when that classroom is done, and then we focus our attention on our students that are in our online classrooms, we still have this YouTube channel that we fill with free information for people that I know. For example, we had a student who had 3 Dalmatians, one of which was deaf. She'd been a dog owner, a dog lover, and she'd done things with her Dalmatian. She said for over 40 years, her and her husband have had Dalmatians. And she wrote me when one of our podcasts came out on how to get your puppy to sleep through the night. And I said, this can work. Like, I have never been woken up by a puppy after the first night, not with any puppy I've ever owned. And nobody with a dog, other than maybe a geriatric dog, should be woke up in the night. So she wrote me and she said, in 42 years, they have never had a full night of sleep without being woke up by one of their dogs. After a week of doing the protocol that I suggested, she said, we sleep every night now. So I said to her, when I die, I want to come back as one of your Dalmatians because it's got a good time going.
I feel like it seems like you traveled to Europe and you're Canadian.
Yes.
You're on the other side of the country that I am. I'm in Vancouver. You are in Ontario.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
Of
I
course.
am enlightened. I feel very grateful for the time
Well,
together.
I'm very grateful for all the gifts that you've given the dog world, and your products are just top shelf. And I so appreciate everything that you provide for all of us dog lovers out there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And
How we end all of our calls and we're doing.
I don't do this very often, but I can do that too.
Every team meeting that we have, we always, so I'm just programmed. I'm on Zoom. I've got to say goodbye with a heart.
And
Good
give
luck.
your dog a hug for me.
Will
A
do.
big one. All of them, actually. We'll talk soon, okay?
Yep. Bye bye.
Thank you so much.